Hi, this is Kathy Ganatic. I continue my series on the 36 decans of the zodiac today with Capricorn I, the first 10 degrees of the sign. People with points and placements in this part of the zodiac have an uncanny ability to adapt to change in life. They ride the waves, like we're going to see in the tarot card, the Two of Pentacles. In the background, you see a ship going up and down on the waves. And this just shows or exemplifies the reality of the energy of this part of the zodiac, that there's something always changing about the energy and the need to adapt in a responsible way. We're going to see that responsibility is big because Saturn rules the sign as well as the decan. And then the idea of expansion and change and constant movement comes from Jupiter, which also rules the decan. And I will bring in the tarot card, the Two of Pentacles in the Rider-Waite deck, as well as the Two of Discs in Thoth, which is called Change. As well as we'll talk about some ancient wisdom from texts that sort of flesh the energy out. Of course, the Hermetic Coppola as well. And then I'll finish off with an example from real life. Francis Ford Coppola, who directed and co-wrote the screenplay for The Godfather, has his rising degree here. And we'll learn how he has had a lot of ups and downs, particularly financially in his life. That can be a little bit of the energy with this particular sign because it is an earth sign, which can have to do with what we can accomplish in the material world. So there's a lot to talk about. If you enjoy the video, it'd be great if you could like and subscribe. I'm trying to grow my channel right now. So let's start off by talking about the sign of Capricorn so we can ground ourselves in the general energy of the sign. Capricorn symbolically is the sea goat, half fish. And there's some mythology around this sea goat. It involves Pan, who transforms himself into this sea goat to escape a typhon, the primordial monster of chaos. So already we get a sense that there can be something a little bit chaotic about Capricorn energy, or a desire to frame. It's like Capricorn wants to take the chaos and form it into structure. And that's the general background of the sign. And so the symbolism of Capricorn, because it combines the goat with the fish, the goat being the steady climbing energy toward ambition, which can come with Capricorn, and the fish tail, which can have to do with trying to work with the instincts, the instinctual energy, the chaotic emotions, and form something in life. That's also part of what helps us understand the Capricorn energy. So there's this idea of uniting emotional memory and that survival instinct with strategic restraint. Progress earned through patience, responsibility, and sustained effort rather than speed or impulse. And of course, we see that because the planet that rules the sign as a whole is Saturn. And Saturn's the last planet we can see with the naked eye. He's about restrictions and boundaries and what's possible in the material world. Saturn rewards hard work over a long period of time that's handled in a consistent method. And Capricorn is also an earth sign. All earth signs are going to have to do with the material world and what's possible. Capricorn adds in a sense of ambition because it's a cardinal sign. Cardinal signs like to start things. When you take that cardinal energy of beginning things and you combine it with earthy building in the world and Saturn restrictions, you get this energy of wanting to achieve something. I always describe Saturn by explaining you can think about standing on the planet Saturn and looking back at the earth and saying, what can I build there? That's kind of the Capricornian energy. Then to get into this particular 10 degrees of the zodiac, the first 10 degrees of Capricorn, we can look at the decanic rulers. Under the triplicity system, it's Saturn again, and under the Chaldean order, it's Jupiter. So we've talked a lot about Saturn already, but what's Jupiter? Jupiter is kind of the opposite energy of Saturn. It's expansive, abundant. he's a teacher. It has to do with growth and creating meaning and abundance in our life. When you get Saturn and Jupiter combined, it's a real powerhouse because you have the Jupiterian desire to build something big, and then you have Saturn containing that and allowing us to do the hard work to actually build a kingdom, let's say. I say a kingdom because every 20 years we have the Jupiter Saturn conjunction in the sky, and that is known in astrology as like the rise and fall of kings. Whenever you have a Jupiter Saturn conjunction, it can be like a new kingdom coming into being. So that's just helpful to think about. Then we can look at the tarot cards associated with this decan. And we see first the Two of Pentacles in the Rider-Waite. This is one of my favorite cards. I have my moon in this decan, and I so resonate with the energy of the adaptability of the Two of Pentacles. It's beautiful. We see there the infinity symbol with two pentacles in it and a man sort of dancing from one foot to another, that adaptable energy. In the background, even more importantly, we see the waves, right? We see ships riding the waves up and down. And so, again, expressing that energy of constant movement and flux and the need to adapt um, to the vicissitudes, to the ups and downs of life. That's very much part of this card. Rachel Pollack, I loved this, that the energy described as an initiation into the material life, because again, pentacles and earth signs are all about materiality and what we can create. So there's this idea of understanding that balance comes not from choosing one thing over another, but from keeping both in motion and adapting and learning their rhythm. So having to adapt, again, being part of the energy of people with points and placements in this part of the zodiac. And then I don't always bring the Thoth card in, but I had to because it is gorgeous. Look at that. Beautiful. Again, you see the infinity symbol and two interlocking discs and circled by a serpent. There, Ouroboros. I can never describe that, but there's this energy of the constant chaos of life that is connected with this card, but the containment of it. And you can see the yin yang symbols there and the crown that rests on top representing that. Again, it reminds me of that Saturn Jupiter conjunction when it comes together in the sky is the sign of a new reign of kings. So there's something about containing the chaos of life to create something and riding those waves of changes to be able to contain the energy of the movement of life to build something in the real world. So the interaction between that force of energy coming into the world, we're going to see that with the Coppola, and then working to manifest and channel that energy, no matter how much it kind of can knock you on your ass, excuse my language, or force you to adapt in the meantime, or as a result of all of that energy. So then we can look at two. I only picked two of the ancient texts. The other one didn't really fit Ibn Ezra. But if we look at the Picatrix and Agrippa, we see these ideas of riding the waves of ups and downs in life. In the Picatrix, we have a man holding a pipe in his right hand, but a hoe in his left hand. And this is a face of happiness, joy, and the scattering of tasks and laziness with weakness and unceasing evils. I see this description as demonstrating the highs and lows that can be part of this card. You get the abundant energy of Jupiter, the explosion of energy into the world, but then Saturn brings restrictions and can bring difficulties and lows. So we get the dichotomy here in this description. On the one side, we have happiness and joy. On the other side, weakness and unceasing evils that can come with this. We're going to see particularly with Francis Ford Coppola, that he had some real highs and lows financially in his life. He would create these movies, make all this money, lose it all, declare bankruptcy, start all over again, and go through that process again. He kept going. And then we look at Agrippa, and this even more fits with Francis Ford Coppola's life because we see the idea of gain and loss. And Agrippa describes this decan as a woman and a man carrying full bags. And the signification of these is to go forth and to rejoice, to gain and to lose with weakness and baseness. So I don't know about that last part about gaining and losing with weakness and baseness, but for sure the idea of the ups and downs and at times having rejoicing moments and other times being at a low is can be part of the energy of this decan. So then we can look, the last sort of source I want to look at is the Kabbalah's Tree of Life. And we're going to see that Chokmah is the Sephirah associated with this decan. But first, just a reminder, the Tree of Life is this mystical diagram that represents the descent of divine inspiration into the world. It's got a lightning flash that traces the flow of creative energy from the divine source, Keter, at the top to the physical world, Malkuth, number 10, at the bottom. This process illustrates how spiritual concepts take form and manifest in reality, connecting the divine and earthly realms. And we see here that we're at the number 2, which is right at the top of the Tree of Life, where there's this primal outpouring of force on the pillar of mercy, the realm of dynamic movement, expansion, and directed power. And this is reminding me of that Jupiter energy of expansion, expansiveness that then needs to be channeled into the real world by Saturn through effort and hard work. Moving from number 1, Keter, which is the sort of the nothingness of the universe, to Chokmah, number 2, describes the shift from pure undifferentiated potential, you could say chaos, into active expression. Keter is the still point of origin, the seed of all possibility, while Chokmah is the first motion outward, the moment when intention becomes momentum. Remember, this is a cardinal sign, Capricorn. So we've got that cardinal, I'm going to begin something energy built in. And then we can connect this to the Two of Pentacles, where we see material potential begins to move, that initiation. The 2 is the first of the pentacles. So it's got this initiatory, I'm going to be learning how to create something in the material world, pentacles being that earthy energy. So at this point, with the Two of Pentacles, material potential begins to move. Resources are no longer static, but must be actively balanced, circulated, and managed. And we see this again with Francis Ford Coppola, where part of his work was around finances, losing money, gaining money, figuring out how to use money to create things, circulating money in the world. Again, Pentacles, Earth. Chokmah's quality is motion without containment, the raw surge of force before structure appears. And in Capricorn, this motion is disciplined yet demanding, requiring adaptability and responsibility. You know, we're also, just in my own life, again, having my moon here, I very much resonate with this. There's a little bit of an exhausting quality that can come from the need to constantly reframe and adapt to change in your life. And just to hold that out for folks who have points or planets here, it's like hard work because Saturn demands that hard work over a long period of time to take that expansive energy and create something with it. So just explicating that a little bit. Yeah, so the figure in the Two of Pentacles juggles the first real expression of material power. It's the first of the suit. Learning how to keep opposing demands in motion, juggling, like that Two of Pentacles card, without collapse. This is Chokmah's lesson. Once force is released into the world, it must be carried forward with conscious engagement. That's the Saturnine. I need to be serious about this. We're going to see this a little bit too when we talk about Michael Corleone. I'm not just going to talk about Francis Ford Coppola, who, directed the Godfather series and helped write it, the screenplay. But we're also going to talk about the very quickly the figure of Michael Corleone, one of the main protagonists in that film, who also expresses the energy of this first 10 degrees of Capricorn. So, first, one of the things I just want to explain who Francis Ford Coppola is. I guess I've already said he directed The Godfather, um, and as well as Apocalypse Now and a number of other films. He has his rising degree here. One second, I'm just going to find my little pointer guy. There he is. Okay. He has his rising degree here. You see it's at 7 degrees of Capricorn. It's with Mars. Mars is exalted in Capricorn. That's why I have a star here. So his Mars, his capacity to start things is very powerful. We see that expressed in all of his putting new work out into the world, being ambitious. Capricorn's a very ambitious sign. And so let's just talk about that ascendant first. And then I'm going to tell you a couple of other things about his chart that I think are fascinating. So his Capricorn one really reflects this life where he spent writing long cycles of effort, risk, and responsibility. He wasn't just a typical director who, plodded along, did films, worked hard. He would create films and create things in the world and go way over budget at times, end up having to declare bankruptcy. He's declared bankruptcy like 3 times. And so he'd like make a lot of money. He made a huge amount of money from The Godfather, and he put a lot of it back into making films he cared about, even when that meant a great deal of risk. And we can see, I was just curious where his Mars Jupiter was. I'm going to let that go. A great deal of risk, but then he would go through serious financial trouble and bankruptcy, but then he'd build himself back up again. So there's this quality. Remember that card, the Two of Pentacles. The ship is at the top and it's, on the riding the wave, and then boom, it's going down again, and then it rides another wave. And that's how his energy in life has unfolded, particularly around financial matters. I thought of him for this part of the zodiac in part because it's been in the news a lot lately, how he's once again in huge financial trouble after taking a risk by paying for this film, Megalopolis himself, and then the film failed, and he lost much of what he had in 2025 this year, and he started having to begin to sell his personal possessions to cover the loss. So, that's the difficult part. The low part of this energy is there could be moments where you feel low, but then you get Saturn, and Saturn keeps going. It's like the little engine that could. And like this energy has allowed Coppola, when he has these big losses, he just goes right back out there and tries again. So there's something really interesting about that energy. Um, yeah, and so I did want to talk about a couple of things in his chart because I thought about, not everybody who has a point or a planet in this part of the zodiac is going to have huge losses and declare bankruptcy. That's not what it's about. Um, but I was curious how that the extraordinary level of difficulty that he's had, because I've not had that same experience. I've had the experience of having to adapt and things changing a lot and being flexible in how I create things in the world, but I've not had huge financial losses. So I was curious how that expressed in his chart. And we can see here that his sun in Aries, which rules his eighth house, which is other people's money, is exalted, meaning it does really well there, can in fact get a little inflated and overdo things and be like, I can do this. And then we see he's got Saturn in Aries right next to that sun. And Saturn is in its fall. That's why there's black here in Aries. And Saturn in Aries in its fall rules his second house of his own money. So we see here difficulty around managing his own money here, and the sort of the risk-taking energy of the sun in Aries, ruled by that strong Mars in Capricorn. I just thought that was interesting that these two planets sit next to each other in his chart. One is super powerful, it rules other people's money, and one has a lot of difficulty, it rules his own money. So we can take a deeper dive there and get a better sense for his biography and how all that unfolded. And then last of all, I wanted to talk about the figure Michael Corleone in The Godfather, because I do think he sort of straddles two worlds in the Godfather films and has to adjust and adapt. And that is the deeper meaning of Capricorn One. It's not just about financial difficulty. So if we think about his role in the film, or that character in the film, Michael Corleone begins the film. He's the youngest son of a powerful crime family, and he's positioned outside the business, and he's, committed to building this legitimate independent life. But then over the course of the story, circumstances force him to step in, take responsibility, and ultimately assume leadership in the family. So this idea of stepping in and being responsible is very Capricornian, because Saturn rules the sign and it's also rules the decan. And then that idea of assuming leadership, which can also be part of this Capricorn One energy, comes from the fact that we've got that Saturn Jupiter combination ruling this 10 degrees, and that signature, Saturn and Jupiter together, can have to do with the king, with new leaders stepping forward. At the center of Michael Corleone's story is this feeling of trying to keep his balance while everything around him is changing. He is pulled between loyalty to his family and the desire to appear legitimate, between love and violence, between personal feeling and hard decisions. Again, that Capricorn One energy of needing to balance and be light on your feet and adapt. There's no moment where things settle. Staying in control means constantly adjusting, often alone as the pressure grows. And this really reflects Capricorn One, not as ambition, but as endurance, taking on responsibility, limiting emotion, and carrying the weight of leadership over time instead of walking away. And I mentioned part of that again because my moon is there, and the moon in our chart is in some ways the most personal part, the part we oftentimes identify with most deeply. And that feeling the heavy weight of responsibility and trying to keep things going, to create and expand, but do so in a responsible way, feels very resonant with my personal emotional energy. So I thought I'd share that with y'all. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, again, it'd be great if you could like and subscribe, and stay tuned. Capricorn 2 will come out pretty soon. Have a great day.